Let me come first. You want the statement read?
Yes, please, sir.
All right, let's let the council escape if it wishes.
You have a copy of the first?
Yes.
Will you distribute them?
We'll hand them out, too.
Can you tell us what the subject matter of this meeting?
We were discussing the war on poverty, and we have discussed nothing else, it seems to me. In fact, I know we haven't. And here's the statement. The City Council met in closed session this morning to discuss matters concerning the war on poverty. In order to make an intelligent decision on this very important problem in the community, it was necessary that the City Council get all of the information that it could concerning the implications that might arise in various actions and decisions. The matters discussed concerned legal alternatives and personnel. No vote was taken, and no member of the City Council was asked to take a stand in this particular session. This will be done publicly when the matter comes up for consideration, and any action by the City Council will be taken as public action with the right granted to the public to be present and express its views.
When will the matter come up for consideration?
I think there will be something said about it this afternoon, Teal. I think at that time, any who wish to express opinions are free to do so, if in their judgment this would be helpful.
You cannot at this time tell us what that matter is.
Well, I think I've said everything in here that rounds up what the subject matter was, Warren, and the intent of the council to be said until we meet in council.
The legal alternatives pertain to sponsorship.
This was discussed, yes. We asked to have all the alternatives explained as they pertain to the legality of any alternative.
Did you learn anything new in this meeting that you hadn't been told before?
I think not. I think it was merely a sort of a general reaffirmation of information that we had to be sure that we all understood so that we could make better decisions.
Was there a general council agreement?
There could be no agreement in such a meeting, Warren. This was not a meeting for a decision, only for information.
The Commissioner's Court, I understand, reaffirmed their stand on the committee's report. Is this what you might mean by reaffirmation?
Well, I think you'll have to wait for this afternoon to see how the council approaches that problem, Jerry.
Was this meeting needed because of the recent action by the Executive Committee on the report made by the Joint Committee?
That I think has to be deciphered from this very beautiful piece of literature. It has a few ungrammatical bits to it still, but it is real literature.
Thank you. Thyroid, no? You have it. If you somehow have a under or overactive thyroid, it's a real sad, but something maybe we'll find out this afternoon.
Yeah, could be.
Tex, you're getting into politics. You're one now in a growing number of people who have made their names and their fortunes in the entertainment field in one fashion or another. What is there about people who have entertained and who have been well known through that medium that makes them feel they'd make good politicians?
Well, it's a very difficult question. I don't know if it affects too many people like that. You just hear of the few that have gone into politics. It happened in this state, Louisiana, Jimmy Davis. It's happened in the West Coast, a couple of our friends, California. I've always had a great interest in politics. I studied political science here in Texas, the university. Had 1 year of law in Austin, and later, I think, a year of law. I had a year of law at the Northwestern University in Chicago. So I have always been interested in politics and have worked in many campaigns. In the Nixon campaign in 1960 and 68, I was Senator Goldwater. I worked in his campaign in 64. Murphy's campaign on the coast, Senator Baker's campaign.
What prompted you to be so long about starting your own campaign? Why didn't you not start sooner?
No one ever asked me before. That's the best answer.
Okay.
I never gave it any thought.
I get the impression from the people
To
you
run myself, I never thought much about it.
I get the impression from the people you talk about that you must be a bit of a conservative, if I may pen a label tentatively. I do that only to say that one would hardly consider the hippies we have in this country conservatives or cowboys. That's something that we quite readily notice. You don't see among the country and western music fans, you don't see people who act like hippies and get out and march in the streets. How come that?
Well, I don't know. Some of the costumes that they're wearing today are things maybe that I wore some 30 years ago. Some of the Indian dress, and possibly one reason for that is that I think most of the country music artists are from rural America, the small towns and the countryside. Like I was born on a cotton farm in East Texas. The hippies, I think if you really look closely at them, what we call the hippie, the Jerry Rubins and the such like, I think you'll find that they're from the larger cities. And it's may not hold true 100%, but I think you'll find that.
Well, of course, we're on edge today because the American League is meeting again tomorrow, and there's still some possibility that they might move the Seattle franchise to Milwaukee. They'd have to move it to Milwaukee now because there's no other place with a stadium ready. We couldn't be ready. So we can't afford to have that lightning strike and are not being prepared. If we lose out tomorrow, it'll be a tragedy. Even if they don't move the franchise, it's a warning that we have to be ready, and so we're eagerly anxious to develop this financing program and to move forward with our construction.
Our program is based on the concept that it takes 4 ingredients to make a successful business. First, there has to be an individual who has a degree of qualifications. Secondly, he has to have a realistic opportunity, and we're providing many of these opportunities through franchise companies and so forth. Thirdly, he has to have an adequate amount of money, not only to open his doors, but to carry him through the period in which the business is building up to a profit. And fourthly, he has to have management assistance, again, for a considerable period of time after he opens up his doors. Our program is designed to present all 4 of these ingredients to the local community so that they can be put together here to create the opportunities and the resources that are necessary for successful business enterprises owned by minority people. By minority people, of course, we mean the blacks, the Mexican Americans, the American Indians, and in other communities, the Puerto Ricans, the Cuban Americans, and the Eskimos.
There's no great urge among the country musicians to have a message in their songs. But you do find more of the country musicians singing about what a great land of America is. We don't sing we shall overcome, or all of the folk group, what we call the city folk.
Mm-hmm.
They have the message songs, and they're usually message to overthrow America. Many years ago, during the years that I spent in New York as a young man, the Communist Party as such as it existed in those days, in the middle 30s and early 30s, they tried to take over the folk singer. It may go back to a statement of George M. Cohan or someone, I think it's Cohan, said, "Let me control the songs of a nation. Eventually he will control the nation." But more of the work songs. I hobnobbed with them. I would sing for them, and it passed the hat for some kind of project. I knew them all. But what saved me is that I had studied political science. I knew where I stood. I was not a communist. I was a Democrat. Of course, later I saw the light and became a Republican.
There was a call to my home on Sunday indicating that we might have a possible intervention from the outside by outside groups at North Dallas High School.
And did this more or less prompt a meeting today between yourself and the superintendent?
Yes. Immediately after the call, I called the superintendent, and this prompted the activities at North Dallas High School for today.
Tell us a little bit about the meeting today. The superintendent seemed well pleased with the way the students have responded and the overall response in the situation.
Well, we all seem very pleased. The students seem to be very calm in their classes, and their class work proceeded as just about as well as any Monday. However, the noticeable factor was that we had approximately 34.5% students absent.
Actually, I really believe that he was dead, because I don't see how he could kind of survive it. But I reached my hand in, my right hand in, as I reached my right hand in the car and laid it on him. Why, my left hand, my one gun was in my left hand. So as I put my hand on him, he was playing possum, and he had his right hand laying down alongside of him. And he raised it up, and he had a .38, and he shot me, and the bullet hit me just above the heart and ranged up and tore my good suit of clothes, but didn't, it scared the hell out of me. And of course, I naturally, into self-defense, I emptied my left pistol into him. That was the end of the story, but that was a pretty narrow escape, and had I not been stooped over, why, he would have killed me.
The city of Arlington continues to have its problems in the exercising of the option to buy the Turnpike Stadium from Tarrant County. Today, Mayor Tommy Vandegrift appeared before the Tarrant County Commissioners Court and asked for a second 90-day extension in the exercise of that option. Mayor Vandegrift explains why.
We haven't lost any enthusiasm for the project. We're very hopeful and optimistic that it can still be achieved, but frankly, the complexity of gaining both tax-exempt status for the bonds, the revenue bonds, and then a market for the revenue bonds is much more difficult than we had first anticipated. We simply need a bit more additional time, and the court was kind enough to grant us that time today. I feel confident that within this 90-day period, we can achieve the necessary financing and proceed with the Sea Life Park and the stadium expansion.
Bond attorney Ray Hutchinson says that the proposed ruling from the Internal Revenue Service could come within a matter of weeks, perhaps as few as a couple of weeks. In this case, the construction could begin immediately after the sale of the bonds, and he says this should be no problem. From Fort Worth, this is Art Sinclair reporting for Channel 8 News.
I didn't think it was necessary. I still believe it's pressure. You just don't have to do that to these people. They're going to meet on Thursday evening, the executive committee, and what we are saying to them, in effect, is if you don't buy what the county said and what we are saying, then you've got no program, and this is wrong. They ought to at least be able to have their meeting and to deliberate this committee's report without any pressures from the sponsors.
What about the charge by Councilman Jesse Price that, in essence, the actions of the executive committee of the DCCAC were pressure to the sponsors?
Well, that's a joke. How are you going to pressure the sponsors?
I think we have already said we would be co-sponsors of this program, and I think we meant just that.
Even if they have recommendations different from the report?
Well, we may have any number of decisions to make, but I think they're speculative at this point. I don't think there's any intent to, on the part of the city, to abandon the poverty program.
Is there any intent on the part of the city to pressure the poverty program into a certain specific form?
No, I think not. I think these people are able to make up their own minds and say what their position is, and so are we. And I think we now have to wait what they say.
Is there going to be a move to put bond interest up in the neighborhood where it will keep pace with the rising cost of living?
Oh, I have no idea about that. I would think that as long as we are competitive with our interest, with that in commerce, that's all they should do. I don't think the government should pay more than a savings bank would pay.
Well, I think you did last year with that payroll savings figure.
Yes, sir.
The $4 billion.
$4.7 billion payroll savings last year.
Why have more people cashing in bonds than buying?
Well, I think that was my opening statement. The reason they're doing it is because they have saved through the years and they find there's more things like good investments or going to school or health reasons, some reason or other, they've decided that they would rather have the money than have it in bonds. And I think that's great. I see nothing wrong with that. So you have complete control over a savings bond. You save it and it's all yours. You're not giving it to somebody else. And when you do cash it in, the dollar is there. It's worth $1. Now you can talk about whether the inflationary dollar makes it good or bad, but then I'll talk to you all day about whether putting in Sears stock is good or somebody's stock is good. When the economy goes down, so does the stock market go down. But here you've got $1, whatever the dollar is worth, and you know you can count on it. And I think people in the brackets of saving $200 or $300 a year need to know that they can count on that the money is there. More important than what interest they get. Because if you saved $300 this year, for example, at 5%, and last year was 4 1/4, you know what that'd be for the year in interest? It'd be a difference of $1.75. Now that isn't going to be the reason why you save $300, is it? Of course not. You saved it because you want to save the money, whether you got any interest or not. So I think we make too big a thing over what the interest rate is on payroll savings bonds.
Mr. Chanin, you have a committee, but just exactly why do you have this committee?
This committee was formed by the House of Representatives to make an inquiry into what needs to be done in county government in Texas as a whole, not only in the metropolitan areas, but in the rural areas, as far as updating county government, making it more responsive to its current needs, current problems, and we're hoping to have a real good group of people to take a lot of time and a lot of study and look into the situation and make some real sound, concrete recommendations for legislation during the next session of legislature.
Let's be specific. The House Speaker must have had some reason for the formation of this committee. He must have had some reasons that he thought maybe the county needed to be reorganized. Do you know of any specific things?
Well, of course, its county government has been kicked around for a long time in the legislative halls, and there were many recommendations made a few years ago that caused an awful lot of interest in it, and it's a continuing problem. I think most everybody is pretty well agreed that some changes need to be made. Exactly what they are and what is feasible, of course, is something we don't know yet, and we won't know until we have time to take a good long look into the problems of all the counties of Texas.
How will this committee go about looking into these problems?
Well, we'll have 9 members of the committee. There'll be 5 members of the House and 4 laypersons who are involved with county government and who are knowledgeable on the subject. And we'll have hearings around the state in the metropolitan areas as well as in the rural areas and hear from the people who are closely associated with county government as to the problems and as to the advantages of county.
Harris County, Dallas County, and Tarrant County, we're rapidly reaching the point where there's not going to be any such thing as a county where ground is concerned. The ground is all going to be incorporated into small communities and this sort of thing. Now, this is going to mean a major change in county government because a lot of functions which are now provided by county government won't be necessary. What are you going to do about that?
Well, we will make recommendations with regard to these problems as to cooperation between your metropolitan areas and your county areas, not only specifically say road functions in your metropolitan areas are fast decreasing. But nevertheless, in your rural counties, this is still a major thing. This is the reason why we've got such a real job ahead of us, because there's so many diverse situations with regard to county government in Texas in 254 counties.
Isn't there a possibility that this might become quite a political hot potato when you get to delving into some of your rural counties?
It has that possibility. Anytime you start suggesting changes, you're going to have people who are opposed to any kind of change. we doubt very seriously the recommendations will meet with complete unanimity. We want to put together a series of recommendations that not only will be beneficial to county government and to the taxpayers, but will also have a chance of passage in the legislature. And you will recall that the legislature is still rurally oriented and will be until such time as we have another redistricting next year. So we've got to look at what we can accomplish and what we think ought to be accomplished.
Okay. I would hate to think that we're selling bonds for Vietnam or some war situation. We're selling bonds for the whole government picture. And just yesterday in Houston, we were talking about if we didn't have this bond background behind us, we'd be going to the moon in a bus instead of the equipment we have today. After all, we have government financing for everything, whether it be for education or health or whatever it is. So I don't think I would be at all interested in answering a question saying we're selling bonds for the Vietnam War. And I haven't heard of anybody not buying them for that reason.
Buying bonds has traditionally been considered the patriotic thing to do. Is the peace movement and a lot of the youth criticism of the government having any effect on bond sales?
No, I think that's just about the same answer I just gave. No, I don't think so at all, because last year we had a big increase in bond sales when it was 4.25%, before it was 5%. I worked on it last year. We've sold $4.7 billion in bonds last year. And this year we expect to sell over $5 billion.
One of the more serious problems is the fact that so much of the work that should be performed by the federal employees is being contracted out to private industry at a cost which is greater than what it would be if done within the house. This caused a reduction in forces, caused a loss of morale, loss of the job security, and is really a problem for the federal employees as a whole.
Could you cite some examples of types of work being done outside the house, as you put it?
Yes, such as maintenance work. Take, for instance, the General Services Administration and their custodial and maintenance work. They contract a lot of this work out. I can't blame the administrators for that because they're not given sufficient positions so as to do the work within the house. They have to contract it out.
I believe the only reason Joe didn't talk about specific incidents or circumstances simply because he didn't want me to worry. He did of course tell me that it was dangerous, and he knew it. He could have, had he wanted, gotten a new assignment, but he believed that what he was doing was very important to his country and to the people there in Laos. Therefore, he felt that he was needed there, and that's why he wanted to stay there.
Now, his job, as I remember from reading previously, was described as being assigned to the embassy, to the military attaché.
If that's true, how did this kind of duty relate to his being killed, do you know?
Well, Joe was in Mang Sui, Laos, which is a small village in northern Laos, very close to the northern section of the communist-held section of Laos. If you don't know the area, it's kind of hard to explain it. But he was close to the what you'd call the enemy line.
Come on around here. Some of you people who want to. You'll never become a member of the order. Will you please? Okay, everybody ready? 1, 2, 3, let her go! Aha!
But I'm not saying that all county government needs to be changed. I don't want to presuppose what the committee might recommend. I'm sure we'll recommend some changes. We'll also probably recommend some of the status quo.
In the event that you get into a county situation in some other county in the state that is uncooperative, will you have subpoena powers?
The committee will have subpoena powers if it becomes necessary. I doubt very seriously that it will be, but...
if it were to become necessary, would you subpoena certain county officials and ask them specific questions?
If it was necessary to the conduct of the investigation. We're not engaging in a witch hunt. We're not trying to do anything to any particular person or group of people. We're just interested in knowing what is good about county government and what is bad about it. Whatever it takes to get to that, I think, is in the interest of the taxpayers.
What kind of things do you expect to find?
I don't really know, Jerry, at this point. I can't say what we'll find. I think we'll find many people with many diverse ideas as to what changes ought to be made. It's impossible to say what we'll find because there's so many different counties and so many different problems around the state.
Now, you say you don't really expect, or you leave me with the impression you don't expect to find any bad guys or any really bad guys. Are you looking for ways to make county government more functional? Or are you looking for ways to make county government more honest?
We'll be looking for both. We'll be looking for ways to make county government more responsive and more down to earth and closer to the needs of the people in the 20th century.